Nails done. Girls with the nails done.
All right, all right, all right. It is time for the return of the Pig Show. We've been away for about a month since we spoke to Mana, of course, before Katowice. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. We've got some lovely new graphics and things. We've got Beasty, who is now on the second monitor. Haha! Production! Amazing! As you can tell, there's a slight difference between a professionally produced show with someone like Cobra Venom behind it and myself. But all I really care about is talking to smart people about StarCraft, and hopefully you guys are happy to listen to it. So thanks for joining us. Of course, today we have the one and only, the glorious, the guy who made the Max Packs famous, or infamous, a great player, ex-pro player, current massive YouTuber and content creator, and person with great thoughts about StarCraft. It's Beasty. How you doing, man?
Thank you for that epic intro. I'm doing great. Happy to be here. Happy to chat with you about the StarCraft. We all love it, and we're here to discuss it.
Indeed, man. So there's so many things I want to talk about today. So for people who don't have context, you've recently done a series of videos, and I guess I'll just summarize those really quickly. Basically, we had I Am Katowice recently, and obviously, I think the community, ourselves, me sometimes, I'm sure you do it as well, we all kind of go, oh, this one tournament was Ember or crap. There were some great games at Katowice. There were some fantastic series, but there was also some days or streaks where there were some average games, to say the least. A lot of very one-sided matches, and of course, to top it off, the finals, which, how would you describe that finals, man?
The worst finals ever. And, I got a lot of people saying like, no, that's not the worst final. Nesty versus Inca was worse. I was like, look, Nesty versus Inca was bad, but back then people were much worse. To have this kind of finals in 2020 is terrible. Like, the whole finals was just bad. And I don't know. To me, that was the worst final because the quality of the players is so much higher and skill than back in the day, but the games were just so bad.
I mean, it was this weird thing. You had old dog Zest, who sometimes looks like he can't keep up in 2020, yet somehow still always has these like great performances once in a while. But he's definitely the player who can kind of sometimes just fall apart against the more modern, ridiculous level of mechanics and everything and strategy that goes into some of these players. But I think the matchup, it was obviously Zest versus Rogue. Rogue is disgusting. Like, if there is one guy who makes me look at his games and see he's so smart at abusing everything, to the point where his games are often not fun to watch recently, I would say, it's Rogue. And that's like a weird thing to say because I think people think I dislike Rogue or I hate Rogue, but I think I don't at all. I think he had so many one-sided matches in this tournament. Even in his close series, there was often these big... it felt like he was pressing his edges and his gambles so much where he would, if he got ahead, he would push it to the limit to the point where when he did his thing, whether it was a Nidus Swarm Host or a big attack, he would just overwhelm his opponent so one-sidedly. And every time I looked at Rogue's games throughout this tournament, I was like, oh, something feels not quite right with how these games are playing out. Like there's something weird that's happening. And obviously against Zest in the finals, it was probably the most amplified we saw in that entire tournament, right?
Yeah, he doesn't really have a style. The best way I can say it is he just abuses the Zerg and the information he has. And that's fine. I don't blame the players for the finals. You were a pro player, I was a pro player. If I went to the finals and my best chance to win is proxy 4x, I would do it every game. I don't care, right? You want to win.
Hells yeah.
He saw how Zest played. Zest went glaive opening almost every single game against Serral. And he saw that, and everyone knows, even the Master 1 player, glaive openings or Twilight openings are just bad against all-ins. You don't have that Oracle. You don't have the possibility to make an Immortal.
Yeah.
And Rogue saw that, and he's like, well, I'm not going to play by having that in mind. I'll just all in. I'll just do all ins that are good against that. And Zest kept opening glaives almost every single game against Rogue, and he just kept dying. And after the second game, I was like, if you're Zest, you have to switch it up. Like, he's gonna do it again, and you know this. And he just opened Twilight again and again, and I was like, well, I guess that's it.
We've seen a lot of this recently in the versus Zerg meta, and I'm probably one of the most famous, I guess, people who is a Zerg apologist, who says, people don't need to just play the one strategy, but we've seen a lot of this simplifying of what the best Terran and Protoss players are bringing out in their versus Zerg matchup, and obviously we're going to talk more about this and stuff, but basically it's gotten to this point where we're seeing Terrans just stay on 3 base and never take a 4th and do this same bio push, off 8 barracks. And if the Zerg's smart enough to actually give up their 4th base and just move the drones to another base, it's like the easiest win of all time, because the Terran is like, I need you to fight me right now. I need you to fight me right now. And then, eventually the Baneling Hydra or the Lingbane Muter just wins the game. And it's sad to see players like Innovation do this over and over and over again, and Maru do this over and over and over again and stuff. And when I see a player who does it, they get all in, they get taken advantage of, they die to it again in the finals. To me, it feels like they've found something that works and they're kind of almost too stuck on that. Is that a strategic error? Is it a pro player's choice error? Yes, but it's also something where it's like, wait, why is the guy in the finals feeling like he's got to do this one Glaives build again after it just got dicked? Like, what is going on in his head? There is this pressure that affects everything in how pro players play, where sometimes it's like, well, they feel like everything rests on a knife's edge, where if they're not executing this most perfect, brutal, punishing build, it's not quite going to work. And there's this weird point in the meta where that seems to be the case more than ever. And I think maybe even 6 months ago, I might not have agreed with it, but you came up with a big point in your video. You were saying, hey, look at this patch, look at this patch, look at this patch. And you went back through them and you talked about all the things that were kind of nerfed down in the game and how strategies were removed, and how the whole point of your video, because we all are imperfect and we can't judge everything in terms of balance, but you were very clear at trying to make this point of like, look, you can't be the god of balance who just automatically tweaks the numbers and makes it perfect. But you feel like there should be a design approach to, let's open up more strategic options and buff more things and stop removing these options from the game, because at the moment there is a little bit too much of players kind of all starting to funnel down in one direction. And I guess, I'm not sure if you brought this up in the video, I did listen to the whole thing, and that happens with StarCraft over time as well, right? Where as people figure out the best options or figure out the more gimmicky ones, people naturally will funnel towards a narrower set of strategies, right? But that also, well, if these ones are actually just better as well, that's going to happen. So you get an amplified effect. So, I mean, outside of, hey, let's say we had one big patch in a few months. They refresh, they do a lot of these changes you suggest. We bring back a lot of the old strategies and try to rebuff some of those things that were nerfed out of the game. Is that something you're on the Nathania side where you think we should do that like every year? Just have a big mix up, refresh the game? Or do you think it's something where if they opened it up enough strategies, we could find the perfect state of StarCraft balance?
I mean, I think you can go both ways. I don't think there's one way to fix quote unquote StarCraft. I think there's a lot of ways to mix it up. And it's up to Blizzard to decide, but they want to go with the route of making the least amount of changes, which I don't think is going to work. I just don't think it's going to work. I know they are trying to reach a point where balancing is not needed, but that's just plain bad. And I personally, I mean, there's so many ways. There's another video that I'll be making regarding the economy and how the economy changed StarCraft from wings to HOTS to now. But my suggestions were, one of the suggestions was, why not swap units every 6 months or even every year? You take out 3 units from each race, you put in 3 new units. And the biggest response I get to that is, well, that would be imbalanced. And I'm like, the game is not balanced now. We might as well have it fun, right? And if it swings in our favor, let's say it suddenly swings into Protoss favor, people will be more happy with that than to have Zerg keep winning. Because I think overall the community has become like very toxic towards Zerg winning, and they don't like that at all. So that's one way. You can go ham and you can take out units, put in new units, which realistically it will never happen because it's very extreme. But the stuff you mentioned earlier that I brought up in my video is the problem isn't game balance. The problem is game design, and where we're kind of getting tunnel visioned into, like, you have to do this. There's no options, which is a big mistake. Actually, the moment when I actually quit pro gaming shortly after is when they nerfed secret missiles. Because to me, that wasn't like, oh, they nerfed my secret missiles, boo-hoo, no damage. There's no late game Terran. You know, like that part where you go late game as a Terran and you want to go late game was gone. And I saw that the moment the patch was announced. And people were like, I'm sure people will figure it out and stuff like that. And my response is, they won't. You don't have AoE damage, and the other two races do. So you're not nerfing the Raven, you are completely removing that kind of playstyle. Then we saw your Reapers. I don't know which came first. I don't remember. But also the Reaper nerf. I felt like it was also a really weird time to nerf the Reapers, because I felt like the Zergs kind of figured out how to defend it. And if I remember correctly, the only two players that used it a lot were Thermal and Beyond. And I feel like when most Terran players kind of, they did it, right? They brought it up in a best of 5, but they didn't do it every game, every map. And then Blizzard decided to nerf Reapers so bad that nobody goes Reapers ever again. And again, it's one of those things. It's not about nerfing the Reapers themselves. It's, instead of Terran having Reaper fast expand into 2-on-1, Reaper fast expand into 1-on-1, and 3-Rex Reaper, suddenly you were pushed into only 2 builds. And as we know, time passed, 2-on-1 died out completely. Yeah. Because Zergs got so good against it that the moment they see it, they're like, okay, I know what to do, and nobody does it anymore. So right now, Terran is stuck with one build order, which is the 1-on-1. And you know yourself, it's a lot easier to play the game when you go into the game and be like, okay, it's 1-on-1. I just need to see if it's a Banshee Liberator or a Battlecruiser, which these days it's mostly a Battlecruiser.
Well, a lot of players out there, they'll say, do I need to go Overlord speed? And a lot of the good Zergs will say, no, build 8 Queens and a Spore in each base every game, and it covers everything.
And that defends everything. Yep. And so the biggest issue is when I watch tournaments, 2 years ago, or Wings or Hots, whatever, if you hide the player names, I'm pretty sure I can guess what player it was based on how they're playing, what build, what unit comp. Now everyone plays the same. Nobody has a play style. Everyone's doing the same thing. Everyone's doing the same opening. And that removes a lot of the individual, like, oh, I love this guy because he plays this style specifically. And you kind of remove options from the players. Yeah. And basically, if I'm a mech player, you're telling me, well, you actually can go mech. You have to go bio. And I'm like, and it's like, well, you have to. The other options you have are nerfed. And that's how it feels with a lot of Protoss and Terran openers.
That's this is such an interesting point, because I used to kind of think of it just as a very simplistic debate where it was, should we keep the game the same and try to just find a nice state of balance so it's more like a sport and we can build a history and you can come back after a few years and use your same build order and it's easy to sink back into, versus should we mix it up every season like in LoL or Dota or whatever and change the balance, and it's about this experience. But I think it goes deeper than that, and I think my eyes were open to this a little bit listening to your videos and listening to you talk about this, because I actually recently was also thinking about this idea of, this history of nerfing out strategies goes back a really long way. And I'm actually working on a video at the moment, which I was going to do yesterday, and I didn't quite find time to do it, where I go over all of the top 5 times or whatever, some clickbait shit, Blizzard nerfed StarCraft pro gamers specifically, right? Yeah. Maru got the Ravens nerfed. You were talking about the recent, this is the missile that did 15 or 20 damage or something, but if you got to late game and you were spamming it, you could still slowly wear people down with the Raven. Beyond got the Reaper nerfed. Tunneling Claw regen on roaches, people don't realize Serral got nerfed when they nerfed the regen on Roach healing while they're tunneling claws. Like, no one could beat him in Roach versus Roach, Zerg versus Zerg. He was just too good at managing 4 fights of Roaches at the same time, because he could just like micro his Roaches around, and you needed to commit more Roaches to clean them up than it was to the ones that were burrowing, just because of the healing rate. And they've actually halved that healing rate on tunneling claws. But there's all these ones going all the way back, right? Obviously, you know, some of them made sense. The one supply Roach, removing the siege upgrade needed so Demago could stop winning every tournament with 1 base Bane busts in the beta, right? Like, you know, like there's ones that made a lot of sense, but there is also, I think, a scary pattern of kind of taking out too many things that are too strong in the game, where especially now when we get to this point where it seems like recently, and like I said a year ago, I was on board with it, this idea of let's just kind of stick similar, make smaller and smaller changes because the game's really good right now. And the thing is, we're still making small changes to nerf things down at this point, right?
Yeah.
We're still doing that, which is limiting some
We're tweaking numbers. That's the issue.
Yeah, and that's got the twofold thing. Number one, people are just in the same meta for long enough. People are figuring out the best things, and so people are at the very top level going towards a narrower set of strategies. And as you said as well, you've just removed a bit of that creative expression. So those two things kind of compound each other, right? Where the more things where the numbers get limited a little bit, you mentioned in your video the auto turret harass, right? You just can't do it now. I mean, it's actually, I'm sure every diamond and below player out there who's played TVT knows what it's like to not even get your auto turrets out in a TVT early game fight, because you go to cast them and your the Raven dies. Even in a fight, even in a frontal fight where like they stim at you, or you get 2 auto turrets out of your 3 full energy Ravens, and then they're trying to fly over the Marines to put down the auto turrets and stuff, and you're like, just drop them. There's all these weird kind of odd changes that have happened. So, I mean, it's a weird situation here. And this is like this whole debate, because I finished Katowice and I was thinking about a few other specific Zerg changes only. And then I kind of looked at your videos and I was like, oh man, like, have we actually seen that much? I mean, if we had to simplify this for people who haven't watched the videos, because there are a few of them, they're really well done. Obviously, they're all up on Beastie's YouTube. There's one talking about design versus balance and kind of this broad spectrum, which I think everyone should start with. And then they should go back and watch the ones which you released after. You did what you'd change about Terran, what you'd change about Zerg, what you'd change about Protoss. And there were some cool little things in there. Because you were saying, look, obviously not every change 100% goes in at once, but you were talking about fundamentally trying to make the races a bit more interesting. Things like removing the planetary fortress from Terran, because it's this kind of thing where it's obviously just a hit to your economy. We're seeing it's like, cool, it kind of defends the base, but it doesn't really. And Terran, unlike the other races, can't just build 20 cannons or 20 spine crawlers to cover a base. And adding a sort of late game upgrade so you can have an auto turret automatically on top of a bunker. And you can build 6 or 7 bunkers to defend a base without having to commit your supply. Trying to solve the fact that Terran doesn't have splash damage. Another one of your points outside of these very awkward siege units. So there's one point you said in this video, oh, people say Widow Mines and tanks are splash damage. No, they're not. And then you just kind of moved on to the next point. I want to give you a second just to elucidate on that point. And is it just because they're too uncomfortable and awkward as siege units?
I mean, they splash the units that Terran doesn't have problems with. Terran has problems with, units like, let's say, disruptors, right, in the current meta. They have problems with Broodlords. Siege tanks don't do anything to Broodlord Corruptor. Widow Mines don't do anything to Broodlord Corruptor. And I know there's going to be that one, bronze, but did you see X player throw Widow Mines under 5 Broodlords while he was maxed out versus 30 supplies? Yes, I have. That's not realistic counter. And Widow Mines, more often than not, will kill half of your army before they do anything to the opponent. They don't counter the proper units. They're not reliable AoE. Having a storm, yes, you can kill your own units and damage your own units, but it's a lot easier to use than to have Widow Mines hit the proper targets.
Yeah.
It's extremely hard to have that focused AoE. Siege tanks, sure, they AoE ground units, but again, carriers, Tempest, faster moving units like Zealots, they don't really do anything against those. And you can argue that, well, Widow Mines are great against Zealots. Yes, Zealots charge in, your Widow Mines blow up, and half of your army's dead as well. and that's not the reliable AoE that Terran has.
Yeah.
And it's not the AoE that Terran needs. Terran needs a different kind of AoE, and a very good unit that did that was the Raven. But again, that's removed, and I feel like that's when issues for Terran specifically started happening.
Yeah.
Where
And just to rehash, the Seeker missile, that was start of Legacy, end of HOTS, was it?
I think it was beginning of Legacy.
Beginning of Legacy.
They nerfed the damage, and then they made it a Shredder missile dealing 15, and then completely removed the damage.
Oh, there was like the repair drone for a little while as well, right? Yeah, they toyed around with it a lot.
Yeah. So, these kinds of changes happen with so many things. I mean, you brought up the auto turret, which is a very good one. Why was it nerfed? I don't remember anyone saying like, man, auto turrets are just, insane. They need to be nerfed. They were an option for you to harass with. You could open up Ravens, and it was actually something that people did. And you could counter it by putting a queen behind the middle line. It would actually outrange the Raven. But by making it such a short range, you would actually need to almost run into a Spore to cast it. So you would get one auto turret off, Spore would hit you, Queen would hit you, and then you have to bail. So those kinds of changes are the changes I mind. If you want to nerf a specific unit or thing, great. If it's a problem, sure. But another strategy that has died completely is the charge lot all in. It's gone. When was the last time someone did a 2-base charge lot all in against Zerg?
Yeah.
I agree. It was super strong, and a worse Protoss player could beat a very good Zerg player. But there's ways around it. Why completely just shut down that strategy forever? And for example, one of the suggestions I had for that is once you get charge, you could get +2 damage on the charge. And then with each weapon upgrade, you get +2 damage more. So that you get that bonus for charge. You can still do all-ins. They're weaker, but they're still there. And then as you scale into the late game, the Zealot becomes stronger and stronger. But Blizzard went with the really weird route, which was giving the Zealot, the Nitro boost. And the only thing it did is it made it worse against units that it was already bad against. And it made it better against units that it was already good against, like Mech. So a lot of people were like, well, isn't Mech better now? Because, Zealots don't do bonus damage. That was never the issue. The issue was closing the distance between the Zealots and the Mech. And now they're even faster, so they close the distance much faster. So a lot of the changes, I feel like they just happen without a lot of thinking what's going to happen after that. Or I always said, if you nerf one thing for one race, you have to compensate it somewhere else. So, if you nerfed, let's say, infested Terrans, and that becomes an issue, then you have to compensate, or you remove infested Terrans. You have to compensate somewhere else, because that's how that works. That's how you create a balance. You can't just remove a strategy and be like, well, that's it. We nerfed it. You're good to go. And I feel like a lot of that happened throughout, StarCraft's 2 history, where they nerf one thing and then they kind of don't do anything about it.
It's such a hard thing to do, right? Because it is this thing where you're weighing up the different matchups, right? And there's so many different overlapping things. So it's this weird thing where sometimes I think when we talk about this, we end up coming across as like, why don't you guys just do the thing? But it's not that. This is, of course, always trying to be constructive feedback. It's difficult, right? Because there's so many overlapping concerns and there's so many different factors. It's very challenging to kind of just say, okay, we should just put this in. I think a lot of us are in agreement where we are in StarCraft 2 right now, though, that we're all happy with more risks being taken. And I personally wish Blizzard would be a little bit more immune to the kickback, the immediate screech of the BattleNet forums. Please just stop reading BattleNet forums in general. But the screech of Reddit, the screech of Twitter. I've got people already on the first day of the new maps coming out saying, these maps are so bad, they're so shit, they're so bad, they're so bad. And I'm like, are they? I don't know. And people are like, you play random, you should know with this match. I'm like, well, no, I don't. Maybe if I just played like 7 TVPs in a row on a certain map and everyone abused the same thing, I'd be a bit more annoyed at something.
And there's no answer to it, by the way. And if there is no answer, you tried everything and there's no answer. But
exactly. Yeah. I mean, people are going to knee jerk, right? They're going to get angry. So there was a point where Blizzard got really good at listening to our feedback as a community, right? I don't know if you remember this point, sometime in the last 2 years. But basically, oh yeah, you've got wireless headset. Sorry, I was like, oh, you won't be able to hear me. And I'm like, oh, wireless headset. He's actually in 2020, unlike me. I'm like afraid of wireless headsets because I'm stupid. Not actually afraid. I'm just too stupid to use them. But yeah, basically, so the PR posts on the balance posts is something I always make fun of, and I'm sure you do the same thing sometimes. Every time you read one of these new balance announcements, and it's like, hello, community. We have been listening closely to all of your suggestions. And like every change, every sentence, every paragraph has like 50 to 70% hedging, being like, this isn't final. It can change. We wanted to do a big change, but we'll pull the numbers back. Don't worry. And like, I kind of just sometimes wish there was like a Gaben, you know, from Valve type guy running Blizzard Balance. He's like, I don't give a fuck. I'm not beholden to anyone. Like, let your screeches out, internet. And obviously, that's like, I get there's a catch-22. These guys are employees of a big company. If the community's screaming at them, they probably get in trouble with higher ups and whatever. But I do think for the long run, there does need to be a little bit more willingness to take some more risks in this regard. Because if we play it too safe, we do end up doing, if you look at the changes over the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a gradual thing of smaller changes in each big shakeup, but then there's also been so much reverting the previous season's changes in the consecutive ones, or you go for the big changes and those all get scaled down to the point where they're non-existent by the time we actually get the final patch that comes out. And we go, wait, what were the actual changes in this last one? And it's like, well, we reverted this one from the previous season, and this thing changed, but they got toned down to the point where they're not as impactful. So I mean, I used to be all for this, as I keep saying, but I think we need more risks, right? We can all agree on that.
Well, you know, micro tweaking the numbers is fine, and that's a fine way to balance the game if your game has diversity in the strategies. But if the game is getting tunnel vision into, you know, a tunnel and just you have to do this or this happens, then you can't do micro tweaks. You have to do something about it. Like, you have to be more active. One thing that people don't really ever bring up, one thing that they don't bring up is, let's say I have 3 friends that quit StarCraft, right? I'm a Joe and I play ladder and I'm Diamond League, right? And I have 3 friends that played StarCraft, they quit, they got bored. And then I read the patch notes and I'm like, Viking health has been increased by 5. Do you think I called them up and I'm like, guys, Viking health is increased by 5? Do you think they're going to be like, oh shit, dude, I'm installing StarCraft again? I've always said, nobody cares about those changes. Who actually cares about this? Nobody.
My 2v2 buddy, Viking Dave, all he does is build Vikings, Beastie. You're forgetting about it.
I remember when people try to tell me that adding 5 health on Vikings is going to help it against fungal and Persebo. I'm like, it's not. Like, guys, are you real? It's 5 health, you know? But on the other side, if Blizzard announced changes and they're like, we are I'll go to the extreme, right? We're removing Thor, we're adding Goliath. You call those same people up, they will install StarCraft again. I guarantee it, because I know how the reactions are whenever there's a BlizzCon patch and whenever I make a video and discuss it on stream. I look at the reaction of people in the chat. Everyone just does not give a crap when it's like, oh, now this unit spell is plus 10 energy or minus 5 health plus. Nobody cares. Nobody's like, oh my god, I can't wait to install. But when they're, you know, last BlizzCon, when they announced that Void Rays will have movement speed upgrade, people were so excited for that. Yeah. Not because it's broken and it's going to become meta, but because it's different. And then straight after that, I did a series with Mass Void Rays with, you know, Speedy Boys. And I had so much fun, you know?
I was dude, the clips of that were great. That you had a fat smile in your face that whole time. Chat was going off.
I had so much fun. Yeah. Everyone found it hilarious, running around, killing bases. At the end of the day, are Void Rays good at a pro level? No. Do they need to be good at a pro level? No, but they made them more fun. And I was actually very surprised when they made that change, because unless they actually thought that would, make them better at a pro level, but I was actually very surprised they went for that kind of change. And I was very happy about it because it was fun.
While we're on these fun changes, something that is a big concern people bring up with your criticism and your feedback, and a lot of people's criticism and feedback, is there's not as many resources going into StarCraft 2. This is a pipe dream. It's not going to happen. What I loved about listening to your videos is you were very aware of the fact we're not going to have, it's a new Terran capital ship that's designed with cool graphics and new voice acting and a new... No. A lot of your suggestions were based around, let's use existing things, right? Bring back, you were talking about, this is something which, guys, don't judge him on this. He says, bring back the mothership core. He's got great reasonings. Go listen to the whole video. But you're talking about bringing back other units, bringing back different upgrades, bringing in campaign and brood war units that are already all in the editor. They're all in there. So these are things very easy to bring. I mean, I say very easy. Obviously, I don't know the exact restrictions on how hard it is to put things in and out, but it's all possible. We don't need, suddenly Blizzard needs to assign an arts department and a design department and creating new assets. It's about literally just putting the things into the live version of the game. So before anyone goes, this is just unrealistic, I think this is actually quite realistic as long as we keep it within that realm, right? We can still have big design changing things. And like you said, even something like adding +1 or 2 cast range on auto turret brings back Raven Harass, right? It's such a minor change. It's not even changing a unit, but it's literally just things that are looking to add more options and interaction, right? That's what we're aiming for.
Yeah, those kinds of changes, I'm all up for. I honestly, these days, I play at Grandmaster. I'm not a pro player. I don't care about, I'm not. A lot of people think that when I make these videos, that I make it because I want Zerg nerfed. Like, that's my whole thing. I literally don't care, guys. If Zerg wins every tournament for the next 5 years, it doesn't affect me in any way. Literally, nothing will change. I will still play StarCraft. I will play whatever race I want. Nothing will change. It's about playing different styles, different races, and having options. I want to go into a game and be like, do I want to open this, or this? And then from that on, you can do more things. That's not what is happening right now. And one of my suggestions was Blizzard, for Blizzard, it would be the easiest to do this because the people would follow. But if they want to go with extreme changes, they can go and make a brawl mode. I never understood why is there a brawl mode in Hearthstone, in Heroes of the Storm, but they never existed in StarCraft. And brawl mode could be those extreme changes. Why don't you make a brawl mode, add a Goliath, add a Reaver, change Raven's abilities, just put it in there, and you can test your balance changes right there. You don't need to make it an official thing and have people play the test map. Nobody plays test maps. Nobody does. But if you make a brawl mode, add a few portraits that you'll unlock by playing them, people will play around. They'll be like, I like this ability on this unit. I don't like this unit. And you can kind of get a little bit of a better grasp on what people would like to see, what people would want to enjoy. And you can bet your ass that they will let you know if they hate something. So that's like the safer play. You get a brawl mode, you have people play it, test around, and then from then on, you can see what can maybe stick in the future. Maybe something is a scrap, maybe something is completely imbalanced. But again, it's kind of like all about, for me, changing it up, having players having different options, and just having more fun.
Hells yeah, man. And speaking of that, I do think it's very unlikely that we will see that brawl mode come in. But I think, like you've done in the past, you've been a leader in getting these modes going. In a very, unfortunately, if it was officially in the game, obviously it would be huge. Instead, it ends up being, your community is one of my favorite communities and has been for a long time. Because there's people regularly playing, what did we call, what was the name of your Beasties free-for-all map again?
Beast of the Hill.
Beast of the Hill, that's it. I had so much fun playing that map a bunch, and I'll still go back and play it sometimes with viewers and stuff. because it's like, you know, and we even finally did it in that what's it called, the Twitch Rivals, you know, where we finally played it, and it's like, oh, free for all can be awesome in StarCraft. Like, you just need, like, you literally. Everyone was like, free for all's just silly, everyone just turtles, and in walks Beastie with his little laser pointer, points it at the middle of the map and goes, get it, cats, and everyone has to fight for the middle, and suddenly you've got this crazy action-packed free for alls. You've got workers fighting over this middle. For anyone who's never played Beast of the Hill, if you guys think free for all is dead, go and play that with some friends. It is the best thing ever. Basically, there is a red dot in the center of the map, and you can change the settings to customize it, but you get income per second for controlling that. So if you're the one controlling it, just by standing a unit in that circle, you get it can be anywhere between 5 and 50 minerals a second, I believe.
Yeah, you can get it from, I think, 5 a second to 50 a second if you want to go extreme.
Which is awesome. That's a huge boost. That's like full base mining, right? 50 a second, something like that. It's pretty insane.
I think it's actually even more. It's crazy amount.
So you got people fighting with workers at the start over that, and then you get set points in the game where, say, 3 minutes in, 5 minutes in, 10 minutes in, whoever controls it gets a victory point. And you can set it first to 5 victory points wins, first to 3. You can change the intervals. So you can make it a really early game, all just fighting over it, and then like one guy gets it, and then 2 people backstab him just before the touchdown. I call it a touchdown, the victory point every time we get it. You know, I'm like, yes, touchdown, I got one. Like, you know, sometimes you'll sneak in at the last second and barely push the other player off it. And it's made, you know, this simple change that's made free-for-all very fun. And that's why I've always had a lot of respect for your way of viewing the game, because I think there's a few people who, they just kind of look at it and they see the problem and they come up with these little just creative ways of very simply solving a problem. And I feel like if free-for-all ladder had that put in it, you know, and never been disappeared, I think it would still be one of the most active game modes today, because that is our battle royale. That is our battle royale. That's what free for all is.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, for that, I remember I played a tournament, a free for all tournament, and as in every free for all tournament, I get killed by 4 players, and then I was like, this is bullshit. Like, it just promotes camping, and then if you spawn on the wrong side, you're dead. You know. And it's not what a free-for-all should be, right? Like, you know, back in the day when you played free-for-all in Wings, it was a free-for-all. Everyone was kind of like on their own side, and you're like, oh my god, this guy's fighting this guy kind of thing. And I was like, what can I do? What would I do if I was, you know, doing this to make free-for-all good, to make free-for-all entertaining? And it took me like 2-3 hours. I was like, what if I put something that forces players to have a goal in the same game that they would fight over? That would completely prevent camping. It would give another goal in the game and not just eliminating players. And that actually, you know, you can look at it. Free for all is like a StarCraft 2 game design. And I didn't change the spawning positions in free for all. I didn't give certain races damage or more minerals. I didn't create more ramps. I just changed the way FFA was played. And it's kind of the same thing that I'm kind of going for with the whole balance versus design thing. You don't need to change units as their damage or health. You can just change the way they're used in the game. And you can fix a lot of units like that, in my opinion. You don't necessarily need to make them broken or nerf them completely. Just, you know, minor tweaks. But, you know, you brought up the Raven one, the +1 range. That changes the Raven so much, and it makes it usable again.
It's huge. So for anyone, if you are excited about the changes that, hopefully I really do want everyone to go, if you don't already, watch Beastie's videos. One of the best YouTubers in the scene, but there's actually an extension mod. So if you guys go into custom games and you search, it's just Beastyqt, I think is the name of it.
I think it's Beastyqt's balance mod or something like that. So
yeah.
Just one thing. This is I want to make some things clear, because people kind of go a little bit crazy sometimes over balance things.
Disclaimer.
So disclaimer. But I feel like I have to do it. So the changes that I've made, I'm not saying put all of them at the same time. I'm not saying that they're 100% done and that's it.
Yeah.
I already kind of tested some of the changes, and I already tweaked a bunch of things. because I did a game against AI and I was like, this doesn't feel good, or this feels too good. And I changed them already, some of the things, but kept the, changing of the playstyle. And I think they're up on EU. I'm not sure on NA. It's called Beastyqt Balance Mod.
It's
and
up.
You can test the changes. I tried to change and help the units that are not used so much. One of the big changes that Pig brought up is the Planetary Fortress. In that mod, I removed Planetary Fortress and I added turrets, just like Protoss has cannons and Zerg has spine crawlers. I added ground-only turrets. And, when I thought about this, some people ask me, why would you change Planetary? Planetary is good. It's actually really, really, really bad at a pro level, and I feel like Planetaries are only good at a very low level. But at the low level, the turrets that I put in would do the same job, if that makes sense. And when people, ask me why are Planetaries bad, at a high level game, they basically ruin your economy once you get a fourth base. This is why so many Terrans do 3-base all-ins, like Pig mentioned. Once you get your fourth, you make it a Planetary. And then you don't have the access to mules or scans, and Zergs and Protosses keep their chrono boost and spawn larvae. Now, at a high-level game, how often do you see, opponent engaging into Planetary and then losing his whole army? I'm sure it happens, but most of the time, people avoid Planetary completely, and then once they have enough units, they just overwhelm it. So what does it actually defend? Pretty much nothing. And by removing Planetaries and adding turrets, you could secure bases a lot easier. You could keep the orbital command on your fourth base. And in my opinion, it would make more sense, because I never understood, why does Terran not have a building that shoots only ground units? And bunkers are an option, but you need to put stuff in the bunker, which makes it so that you have less supply on the field compared to the other two races. And this is not a balanced thing. This is not, Terran's weak, that's it. This is literally, you can play differently as a Terran, just based off of this one change. You can be more aggressive. You can be more defensive, right? At the same time, you can use those turrets as defensively, or in order to camp, or in order to make the army out on the map. And a lot of people thought, well, you could just do cheeses with them. Well, I made it so that it requires armory to build those turrets. So then it solves the problem of people just, rushing with those OP turrets and killing everyone.
Exactly.
And stuff like that. It's more so for the late game to cover the bases rather than early stages.
Well, there's a sharp swap between Zerg versus Terran modes. Even when Maru was winning and dominating in 2018, part of what made that year so magical for both Serral in the foreign scene, Maru in Korea, is they both made incredible comebacks from way behind in games. But when you saw Maru do that, especially against Zerg players, for instance, and this is the same thing I do on late game in my ladder, is if I'm a certain point behind against a Zerg, you build layers of planetaries and walls, and you very slowly take one base at a time, and you wait for the Zerg to be stupid enough to kill himself onto you. At a pro level, that doesn't work against someone like a Serral. It works every time against Su. Su likes attacking into planetary fortress tank layers. Unfortunately for him, and fortunately for... I remember Maru being 100 supply down versus him and coming back in a 2018 map, and I was just gobstruck, what? But it's this thing where the Terran would be I'm going to sit here now for the next 20 minutes, and then I'm going to try to either mass nuke or do one big ghost lib push, basically. The whole thing is I'm just sitting there and I'm behind these planetaries and I'm just hoping you'll attack into it. And the planetary is very good as a defensive tool that is very hard to dislodge. It's being repaired. It can have armor upgrades. It's just that thing where it's if you're not playing that ultra defensive turtle style, once you get to a fifth base, 20 zealots and a Colossus walk in, they kill the planetary if your army's not there, right?
Or just banelings, they do a run by and
Baneling
maybe
Hydro.
they don't kill a planetary, but you lose the whole mineral line, and it's
exactly.
What did the planetary do?
It's so exposed. You can't cover your bases. And the thing is, I would actually say as a Protoss or a Zerg, if I attack into 10 bunkers with auto turrets on them, that's annoying, the same way it's annoying attacking into 10 cannons or 10 spines. But I think I would be less frustrated attacking into that with a backstab or a counterattack than I would attacking into a planetary with 2 tanks behind it, or a planetary with like SCVs repairing it or something, because of its difficulty to dislodge. And that's why, like, you know, like you said, it's this thing where it's like, well, it's really powerful at doing this job, which any player with half a brain just refuses to engage with unless they have enough to just snap it and then walk away, right? Yeah. So it creates this thing where it's like, you can't mess with this unless you can just crush it, and then it doesn't really do anything. So it creates this kind of interesting and awkward point. So I like this idea of opening up these choices. I'd like us to move the discussion elsewhere, because I think one of the most important things here is we've talked a lot about a bunch of cool changes you have. And I guess to summarize that part of the discussion, and we can come back to it, of course, open up more options, more strategic diversity, try and specifically address the problem points that feel frustrating and uninteresting and limited with each race, right? Things which aren't so much a decision. I actually like things like your mothership core idea to say, okay, bring back the mothership core because it's more fun and interesting, but you can kind of actually, because the shield battery is not a choice. I loved your breakdown on the shield battery is not interesting. It can only be used to defend, right? It's just, I saw an attack coming, put down shield batteries. But you said, why not have a choice between overcharge or shield battery out of the same energy pool on the mothership core? And I thought that was just such a clever, fun idea.
Yeah, I mean, what's the difference between stats using shield battery and your gold 3 Joe? Nothing. They both use it equally well. You just plant it and that's it, right? There's no like, maybe I should do this. No, you just make a shield battery and it's just there doing its own thing. It's not a bad building. It's just promoting a play that's just not interesting at all. And you know, I did get the most complaints about Mothership Core. Because people didn't like that unit. But I think the main reason people didn't like that unit is because of pylon overcharge rushes. And that's very easy to solve. And the problem that problem specifically, I solved it by making it so that you can only use pylon overcharge or shield overcharge when it's near Nexus or a finished warp gate. Yes, you can still rush with it, but it will be so delayed that the opponent will have enough units.
I think that's a very elegant solution to that side of it. Now, is it still a super defensive, strong tool? Yeah. Is it still a little hard to deal with that there's this early flying unit? Yes. I still am on the fence with that. You know, to be honest, I'm like, I still remember that being such an annoying unit to attack with. At the same time, I miss defending with the Mothership Core so much because it was such a fun unit to use and slap down drops and things. But the point here is that you're being very experimental and you're very open about, you couldn't just throw these all into the live thing. Say, guys, we're playing DreamHack, Dallas, Masters Dallas or wherever. On this patch, let's go. Obviously, pro gamers would be frustrated. So, thinking about this, we're looking at pie in the sky, cool ideas. We're talking about this, I guess, to elucidate your theoretical idea and one which I'm on board with. Open up strategic options. Let's get more interesting play going. Let's solve some of these issues. Let's bring it back down to, let's imagine we're trying to sell this to the Grinch of StarCraft changes, pro gamers, and also Blizzard, who is very heavily influenced by how those pro gamers are going to react, right? So let's start to think a little bit about this. And this is something I just want to toy ideas around with, because I want to hit, if we had a wish list, yourself and me, I want us both to just have a little discussion about if we could pick 4 or 5 changes to go into the game right now that would address the biggest problems, right? Specifically, I think the Zerg problem, where I don't think Zerg just get free wins. I don't think Zerg players are worse or anything, but I think there's just some weird advantages going on that are making the verse Zerg matchups a little bit unfair. How can we address that? How can we maybe make Terran a little bit, just not quite as stressful to play, or in some way solve those biggest issues of Terran? If we had a wish list, what's at the absolute top? Is it the Creep Tumor vision change that you mentioned? Because that's one I really love.
So I think each race has very specific problem right now. I think Terran's problem is economy, late game. Those are the 2 things. And most of the changes I made are for those 2 things. I think Zerg's problems that Zerg suffers from is dealing with AoE is extremely frustrating. When I play Zerg, to me, that is the most frustrating thing. And I personally hate how you can lose the game as Zerg to 3 storms. Like you're just like, okay, I thought I was going to win this. And it's about making the game more fun, less frustrating. For Protoss, I thought that the openings and different things you can do and just choices in the early game. I think Protoss's early game has become a little bit dumbed down to, we're just doing the same thing now. So those are the 3 options that I thought were, or 3 problems that races suffer from. And I would say that gameplay-wise, fun-wise, Protoss is probably the most complete one. That's why I had the least amount of changes for Protoss specifically. So to answer your question, I would 100% bring back Raven the way I mentioned in the video.
So that's interference matrix you'd remove, right?
I would remove interference matrix. I would put defensive matrix from Brood War that would absorb 250 damage for 15 seconds. It would cost 75 energy. I tested this. People initially reacted with, oh my god, you can spam nukes and ghosts are unkillable. And I'm like, guys, it's 250 damage.
Yeah.
6 would stem break the shield in like 2.5 seconds. But this is something that would help Terran in the early game. Again, you have a choice. Which unit do I use interference matrix on? Or a defensive matrix. You can use it on bio units. You can use it on mech units. It would be a great addition to mech as well, which I think currently at a highest level especially needs help. But defensive matrix gives you for a lot of different plays, you know. And the second change to the Raven, adding the +1 range to the cast of the auto turret, not to the range where it shoots, but the cast range from the Raven to the auto turret. And the third one is I would remove that Dorito dust crap, and I would add the old Seeker missile back. Now, when I say the old Seeker missile, it would be a Wings of Liberty Seeker missile, so it would have 3-second lock-on time to something, and it would slowly start flying to the unit. You can simply move away from this, and it will fizzle out like you did in Wings. And if the unit is fast enough, like Hellion or Mutalisk or Zergling, you can literally outrun it, and it will fizzle out eventually. Now, it would not do instant damage. So the problem with the old Seeker missile is that it can blow up your whole army in 2 seconds. So the way I went about this to give Terran late game AoE is the Seeker missile would cost 125. It would have the weaknesses of you can just move away from it. But also, it would deal 100 damage over 10 seconds. And it would not be stackable. So if you fire 5 Seeker missiles...
Sorry to interrupt. Was that 125 impact damage plus the damage over time, or just the damage over time that you wanted to have?
Sorry, can you repeat? You cut off for a second.
Sorry, was that did you want to do the old impact damage, or were you saying are you saying 125 damage when it hits as well as the damage over time?
No, just damage over time. So
okay.
The damage when impact is gone, right? It would have 100 damage over 10 seconds. So what this means is if I cast 5 Seeker missiles on one unit, that's still 100 damage over 10 seconds. And let's say you cast it and the unit is burning, because we added that burning effect, and the unit took 80 damage. If you cast another Seeker missile, the effect is refreshed to 10 seconds. So what this would do is you would have a late game unit that you can zone out big clumps of armies, but you can simply disengage against it. So it's not just, oh, this is OP, it killed my whole army. You could play against it, and if it hits big units, they can recharge, they can regen, and it's not insanely effective against just simply everything.
If you get a good angle, you can also fight through it, right? Like, same thing where if you've got a good fight, because it doesn't stack, whereas with even the 20 damage anti-armor missile, if you were a bit too clumped and they threw 20 of those all in a clump, you had to spread and disengage, or your whole army's going to die. But with this, you can kind of just say, no, like, I can stand my ground. I've got a really good fight here. We can take a few of these because it can't stack, right? So that's much slower damage than Storm, by the way. That's much slower. 10 a second as opposed to 20 a second.
So people actually brought up this, like, oh, this is too OP, 100 damage over 10 seconds. I'm like, guys, Storm deals 80 damage in 2.6 seconds. But just think about that.
Oh, you're saying 10 current real seconds as well. You're not even talking Heart of the Swarm seconds.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
damn. That's like way... Okay.
Time.
That's even less. Because I still think in old time, Blizzard time. So I was thinking
Yeah,
4
so-
seconds versus 10, but it's 2.6 versus 10. Okay, that's massive.
So it's 10 seconds damage over time. So you're taking 10 damage a second. Now Storm deals 80 damage in 2.6, and it's instant, and it costs 75 energy. This is on a flying unit, so it's better because it's on a flying unit as far as that goes. It's 125, and it has 3-second activation period. And even when it activates, you can outrun it. So one of the most exciting things for me that you can do is you can Seeker missile your Hellion or your Medevac, and you can run them into the enemy army, like you used to be able to do.
Yes, I forgot.
Now, people are like, well, is that balanced? It's balanced because it's shit. But you know what it is? It's fun. It's so fun. That's one of the most fun I've had in StarCraft 2. Seeker missiling your Medevacs and running them into the opponent. And it was fun to watch.
So
it was
cool.
just great all around, right? So I think this version of Raven would bring back the strength to the Terran late game without making it, oh, I got 30 Ravens. I guess I just win the game because I can just spam Seeker missiles on everything. This would make it so that using feedback against Ravens is much more important as well, right?
Yeah.
You want to deny the Ravens. This would bring back the Ghosts into, well, I need to deny High Templars for my Ravens. And it would kind of create this counterplay and, once again, the dance that we used to have that we don't have anymore.
That's such an interesting idea there. I mean, I think I always think of when anti-armor missile did damage and how I could just go Thor Hellbat Raven in late game in every matchup and like win with spamming the missiles. And it was like, it was too simple and too easy, right? But I think not having the damage stacking kind of solves that. And it's, you said 125 energy for a missile, right?
Yeah, so you can only use one per Raven.
You need a lot of
So this
Ravens
is
to
not
spam that.
something-
Yeah.
Yeah, and even if you spam, you're going to overlap them. So it's actually just not good to spam them at all.
Yeah.
I tested this. You can outrun it currently with a stemmed Marine. You can outrun it with a Hellion, with a Mutalisk. So you can just move away from it. But if the opponent hard engages on you and you cast it, their army will be melted. So that's one change I would definitely put in. The other
Raven.
change, I would probably help Terran early game economy. Initially, I played with the idea of making orbital commands free, but mules mining less. But I tested it, and the economy ramps up too fast. So I would probably go with something more mild, as in reducing the orbital command cost to 100 minerals, or if that doesn't do much, maybe 50 minerals. Because I think Terran economy is not necessarily bad. It's just that the amount of resources you need to invest to unlock, quote-unquote, your macro mechanic, which is Mule, is too much compared to the other races. You're paying 550 minerals plus the SCV building time. And I think that's too much. And you can't make the SCVs during the time that Orbital is getting upgraded. If I had to pick two for Terran, those probably be the two. For the Zerg, I would 100% reduce Queen range by 1 against air. I think when that got announced back in the day, I think that was single-handedly the worst change in StarCraft 2. I think together with the changes that we discussed, like design changes, that change killed Cloak Banshees completely. I remember when it happened, a week after, people just did not go Cloak Banshees. You could not hit a drone without getting slapped back by a queen. It doesn't matter what angle you took. If the Zerg was good at a GM level, you would instantly get slapped back. And at around the same time, people stopped using Liberators against Zerg as much. And both Liberators and Banshees kind of just went away from the meta. Together with -1 auto turret range, people didn't use Ravens anymore. And then we only had, battlecruisers now, and that's it. Because Queen range doesn't matter. Because you kind of want to be on top of queens anyway.
I honestly, this is one of those changes. There's always Zerg screeches whenever you mention that. But I'm totally on board with it because honestly, I get that Zerg don't have good anti-air, but just to back up your argument here, as someone, and I understand it'll be a bit harder to defend certain harassments, but it's so crazy to me, and it's a combination of factors. So, some of these things we might change our mind on and say this needs to stay. because we're making the Banshee a bit faster, and we're adding cast range on the auto turret, but we can leave the Queen as it is, right? But maybe we give that Prism back the extra pickup range, so the Archons can still like maybe we end up saying, you know what, the Queen range is okay. But the reason I think this is a thing is just it is like, you know, Oracles just getting shot down from so far away. The Queen shoots from so far. It's for me the problem is the fact that the Queen is something you just build as standard as part of your economy.
It's not
right?
an option, right? You just make it.
Yeah, and it's like, well, okay, they open Stargate. Okay, I'll build 2 more Queens. Like it's just this real, like, you just have these, and you just against Terran, you just always build like 7 or 8 Queens, and they're just kind of there. And don't get me wrong, there are situations where you can get taken advantage of, and there will be problems that are more exacerbated by it. And don't get me wrong, BCs can be frustrating to deal with. You know, and maybe that's something that needs to be answered in kind. But I think right now, you know, every time I see a Terran open Banshees, I just get sad because I'm like, well, if the Zerg handles this right, this Terran's dead in this game. And like, I feel like unless you think your Zerg opponent's going to do a Ravager Ling timing or an all-in, this is a good way to give a worse Zerg a big edge over you as a Terran player. And the Queen is a big part of that. So the Queen, it's limiting interaction. I keep seeing players try to build oracles, and if they're not
limiting interaction is a very good way to put it. It's limiting interaction that other races have against Zerg.
Yeah, the drops keep getting shot down from too far away. For me, it's just, it's too much of a get the frack out of my base, right? Get out of my area. I think of the auto turret harass. You know, the reason that auto turret got nerfed, by the way, just to touch on a much earlier point, is there were maps where you had 360-degree airspace all around the edges, where the Ravens and the Archon drops were coming in from. And Zergs were also just bad at dealing with it at the time. I specifically remember people like, you can't stop an Archon drop, you can't stop Raven harass, it's free. And you'd watch Zergs just inject, and their Queens would just be sitting in front of their natural or something. And I'm like, why are your Queens not on the edge of your base? You've got Overlords seeing them coming in. You should be shooting these units as they come in. And they weren't doing it. They complained. They got a buff, and we got auto turrets nerfed, and we got the Warp Prism nerfed. And this all compounds, right? You've got your aggression is nerfed, and their defense is buffed at the same time or within a short span. I think that's created a compounding effect, right?
Yeah. So I know that this is, you know, a change that a lot of people looked at as it's a straight up nerf. And I think that one thing we can all agree is if one race needs a nerf, that's the one. But it's not just, oh, let's nerf the Queen so it's not good anymore. It is indirectly buffing Banshees. So I don't want to, you know, trash talk Blizzard, but if Blizzard looked at this and they said, no one's using Banshees, let's give them 5 more damage, that is not the solution. The solution is think, why is Banshee not used? And you should go after those things without trying to disrupt too many of the other things. So I don't think having Queens interacting with Broodlords or Battlecruiser, sorry, would make much of a difference. Because again, Battlecruisers are trying to be on top of Queens. So the extra range, sure, some Battlecruisers are going to get away with no health, right? But you will be able to use Banshees more, maybe Liberators more, and it will open up the game, like you said. Maybe people are going to open Void Rays against Zerg. You know, maybe they're going to snap a drone or 2 or 3, and instead of being dead because Void Rays are pretty slow, right? Maybe that's something that can happen. And at the end of the day, if it's a problem, and if suddenly Zerg can't do anything, there's other ways to compensate for it. But if I was in charge, I would never revert the Queen change. That was a bad change when it happened. I would do something else. Be like, okay, what is the issue? Is it just air units suiciding into the worker lines, or what it is about? And I think the point that you brought up is something that I noticed over time. And if you actually go back through patches in the past, you will see the double nerfing all the time, the double buffing / double nerfing. So like you said, they nerfed the pickup range, but then they left the Queen +1 range on air. Why? Why not nerf, right, the Queen if the Archon pickup range was nerfed as well? Then you're double buffing the Queen against Archon specifically, and people are less motivated and inclined to go for those Archon drops. And I think a lot of that happened, right? Like the Liberator, when they nerfed the range, great. They recently nerfed the range, as most of you guys probably know, on, what was it? You can help me out here. On Liberators They nerfed -1 range on. Was it Tempest? I can't remember. They nerfed the range on like 3-4 units.
So the Broodlord obviously lost its like super extra range. And I think the Thor, and obviously the Thor got a boost. I don't think the Tempest lost any range. The Liberator definitely lost one with the upgrade, but you can get the upgrade easier. Chat will help us out.
Let's take Liberator as an example, right?
Yeah.
That leads into a whole different problem. They nerfed the Liberator range by 1. Fine. Great. But now, not only it's nerfed, but the Queen has an extra 1 range on it from comparing it to the past. And Blizzard didn't want to do that, but didn't think of the implications. I think from what I've heard from a lot of Terran players, pro Terran players complaining about disruptors currently, and people are saying why they're issue all of a sudden. They're an issue because they nerfed Liberator range by 1, but they didn't nerf the Disruptor range by 1. So now Disruptors can kill Bio, and Liberators are not in range of it. And that change, again, went through, and indirectly they buffed Disruptors when there was no need for it. So I think a lot of these changes kind of sneak through the cracks, and a lot of people don't think about them.
Some legacy changes that kind of need to be taken into account, right? And I'm a big one for that, where... So part of the reason as well the Queen got range and why all these things, the Liberators, remember how good Liberators were, even without range?
They had more range than now with the range upgrade.
But it was also solved with map design. Remember the early game, a Lib would set up in a spot and you couldn't get it without going in the Lib zone, right? And there was like these...
You needed Ravagers to kill it.
You needed Ravagers. And sometimes even without a range Liberator, it could siege up and you actually couldn't get it with a Queen because there was no edge behind the minerals. Now, every map maker has a thick... I still out of habit. Every time I look at a new map pool, I check the distance behind the minerals on every base, and there's like this fat swathe of ground where I'm like, oh, this is not a good range Lib map. The last good Lib range map we had was the end of 2018. It was the big white map, top left, bottom right. It was played in like the BlizzCon finals a bunch. Really, really long map. And there was tons of bases where you could set up range Libs and just, not get hit. I remember winning against a lot of Protoss players who'd opened Blink and didn't have a Stargate because I could just siege 3 range Libs on their bases in the late game and they'd be like, oh crap, start a Stargate. I can't, mine from my bases. But since then, that was 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago, we have no maps where Liberators are abusive in that same way. That is not a thing anymore. So that was like another legacy problem, which maybe at the time led to we these Queens really need another range, man. These Libs are just so brutal right now. We've got to give these Queens an extra range because that changed it so often. Even when people rushed range Libs in that meta, they could only siege on 1 mineral patch, or even then the Queens could just tank through the Lib zone and snipe down the Lib because 2 of them could barely reach it. And if the Lib player wasn't quick enough at pulling back, there was like this interaction. And now it's like, there is no threat of that at all on the current map pool, right? So to bring it back, let's keep on track. We've got the Raven. We want to redesign that Raven and make it more interesting. Give it that late game damage. We've got nerf the Queen anti-air range as another big one. Also, of course, the Terran economy change with the orbital as well.
So the next I'm kind of divided to, because I want to do 2 changes per race. I'll just do 3 for Zerg and 1 for Protoss.
Right.
I think the Zerg, like I said, is very frustrating to play against AoE units and spells. So when they announced the Microbial Shroud, I said it straight away. It's a terrible ability. It will not be used, and it needs a buff. It was just a bad ability. You could see it. I think anyone that saw that change was like, what is this shit? So instead of it reducing the damage coming from ranged units, I would reduce damage done to the units in the Shroud by 50% from AoE attacks and AoE spells. So what this would do is if you're playing a PvZ, you can use Infestors, let's call it a cutie Shroud, and you can use it and you can literally sit in storms because they would deal 50% less damage. But what is the downside of it? The downside of it is you can make it so that it affects both your units and enemy units. So you can't just spam them without being like, well, whatever, I'll just spam it on the enemy units, because then you're protecting their units as well. So this would make it so that if you're stacked up on AoE, whether it's disruptors or lurkers in ZVZ, which I also think is a little bit of a, not necessarily a problem. It's just they dominate quite hard. So if you have this shroud, it would reduce their damage by 50% because it is I would count it as an AoE. It could change the way that the game was played. And if you're pushing into the Zerg, those shrouds could buy you time, because the microbial shroud that is in the game right now, it's completely useless. I mean, it's just bad. There's no way around it.
A lot of people, when they think about these spells, because your spell there sounds awesome. I love this the cutie shroud.
Cutie shroud.
Get it tweeting, guys, at Blizzard. Remember that SC2 balance team Twitter, definitely the official actual balance Twitter account. Yes. The one that's always posting memes. Yeah. People, recently we were talking about this the other day on streams. I was saying, well, I actually beat this carrier army with microbial shroud. I think there's something there. I think the one thing we have to remember is these spells will always have some very niche usefulness, even microbial shroud as it is right now. But you've got to remember, even with what you're suggesting, the cutie shroud, the opponent can just pull back and not fight, right? These sort of spells are amazing if you've committed to the fight and you force the engagement. But a lot of the time you'll be like, all right, I've set it up, throw the clouds, go, and your opponent just like pulls back and disengages and is like, yeah, come fight out of the clouds. And you're like, oh, it's actually really hard to force my opponent to fight in spells like this. So they are, by their very nature, not ridiculously overpowered. Even if you think like, oh, I mean, but if they're just, all their splash damage is halved, it's like, well, first of all, covering your whole army with this is really difficult. Secondly, the fact that people don't always have to fight there, and you've got an infester to cast it, which is still a unit, which does it do that much? It's a very expensive gas unit, this is a big investment. So there is a cost there. I really like this as an idea of creating something that'll have more utility, right? People are like, oh, I mean, you can beat carriers with hydras, and it's like, guys, Psystorms and Disruptors still exist. Like, there is a reason we don't see Microbial Shroud in pro play.
Yeah, so the thing is, you brought up, a guy that beat carriers with that. Now the question is, why would you ever use that when you can just neural them? The neural is just a better option in that case. In the neural, I don't think there's any situation where using Microbial Shroud in the current form is better than just simply taking the carriers. Unless you're running with one infester, okay. But neuraling is almost always better option. But when you're fighting against Templars, you can't just neural the Templars. Yeah. Yes, you can neural the carriers, but there's a problem of the AoE and your whole army getting dumpstered by the AoE. So this is why I changed the shroud the way I did, is because it gives you an option. Do I want to protect myself against AoE? Or do I want to take the carrier and reduce that incoming damage? And this wouldn't work for just, versus Protoss. It would work against Siege Tanks. It would work against Widowmines. It would work against Hellbats, Banelings, Disruptors, Colossus, a lot of different things, Archon Splash. So you would need units that deal single target damage in order to fight these kinds of armies or these kinds of playstyles. And I do think that if there's one thing that Zerg, again, suffers from, it is dealing with those AoE-based units / abilities. And it's extremely easy to lose a game as a Zerg to those kinds of units. To Archons, like stacking your Corruptors or stacking your Mutas, stacking your Banelings against Storms or stuff like that. It's super easy to lose your whole army. Now, one change that I also made to the Zerg is buffing / changing the Ultralisk. I think Ultralisk is such a... I know a lot of people don't like it because it's quote-unquote just a move, but at a high level, it's actually very, very difficult to use Ultralisks well. And this is why we don't see them, and when we see them, they're broken. Because it takes a lot of setting up, a lot of situations where Ultras are just bad, maybe because of the map, maybe because of the army comps. Yeah. And I personally would love to see Ultras more. Not against Terran, because they're already seen. Maybe not every game, but we see them, right? I would love to see Ultras in ZVZ and ZVP. And the way I went about this change is I made Ultralisk have no armor tag. Because Ultras are complete garbage in ZVZ and ZVP because specifically and only because of Lurkers and because of Immortals. Those two units completely make the Ultras unusable in those two matchups. I don't know if you guys have ever seen 10 Immortals versus however many Ultras.
Oh, yeah.
They literally get one shot. They just disappear. And if you think about it, it's a tier 3 unit. And he completely gets obliterated. Now, I know some people will say, well, from lore point of view, ultras should be armored. Nobody cares about lore, okay, that plays multiplayer. So, remove the armor tag. There's actually a lot of units that don't make sense, whether they're bio or armored, okay? So don't bring lore into multiplayer. Nobody cares. Now, remove the armor tag, give them 100 extra health, but reduce armor by 1. So what this does is immortals are suddenly much worse against them, but if you would just remove the armor tag, they would actually just kill everything, because then there wouldn't be any unit that's very good against it. But by reducing the armor by 1, you open up Ultralists to be more vulnerable versus fast attacking units like Marines, like Zealots, because they do double attack.
Yeah.
Links, but obviously you're not going to use Links versus Ultras. But then Lurkers are not just going to demolish Ultras completely. Immortals are suddenly not going to demolish Ultras completely. But there's still ways to kill them, right? Archons would still do a crap ton of damage. Suddenly Zealots would be a little bit better. Immortals will still be good, but they wouldn't demolish them.
It's still a lot of hit points as well. It's a big meat sack. So I mean, obviously, I think that's one where, because they're a melee unit, and melee units are so good when they get the right engagement, right? When they get the flank and the surround. This is something where you'd have people screeching that it's too weak and that it's too strong at the same time.
It's super hard to,
It's hard to balance. You'd need to tweak the numbers. Like maybe we'd be like, actually -2 armor, but give it 200 hit points or something. Like, you know, I'm sure there'd be some number shifting and stuff, but it's just an interesting idea, right? You make it less countered by the immortals and the lurkers, marauders as well, not as powerful against it, of course. It could cause problems potentially, but you know, basically you want to make the ultra a more interesting unit. And the thing is, for me, something I was thinking about when I was listening to you talk about this, and this is when I was just kind of thinking about, what if like Zergs, I mean, their Broodlords have already been nerfed a little bit. What if they're like Broodlord kind of like in Viper combo or whatever? So, some of their other late game stuff got nerfed to the point where it's not the core late game, and the core late game actually becomes, everyone's like, no, you just go ultras, and it turns into this thing where it's like all about like, oh, you can't give the ultras the fight, right? Like you know, the Terran and the Protoss is all about like, don't get flanked by the ultras, because like you're screwed if that happens. But if you can always like, you know, keep your army in the right sort of position where the ultras can't come in from two sides, like you'll actually be really good against it. It just creates a very different dynamic where it's much more like, ooh, we got to be careful about that big swarmy Zerg army. Whereas what we've seen in Legacy of the Void is late game, Zerg has swapped into what Protoss used to be in many ways. At many points in the Legacy of the Void meta, where Zerg has the elite flying best unit in the game, the Broodlord, with the fancy spellcasters, the Vipers and the Infestors backing it up. You've got this awesome, you know, the ultimate medevac on the ground, the Queen, able to heal that ultimate flyer. And you've got this very immobile, slow army where you want all the pieces together and you want to take the perfect fight. And sometimes that's mixed with some Zergling and Baneling backstabs and things that are still Zergish. But we've kind of seen Zerg go towards a little bit more of what I feel, it shifts gears and very much stops being a swarm race and becomes every unit is sacred and must be used perfectly. I guess that kind of flows into the early game as well with Zerg and Legacy, where because there's less lava, you've got things like the Ravager, which ends up being this elite defensive spellcaster that you build as like a trigger button when you see an attack coming. That's its whole issue. I don't want to unpack that can of worms too much. But it's interesting where if we could shift it, and for you, I mean, your point basically is just open ultras as an alternative option, create more styles. For me, that's just exciting. Imagine seeing Zest versus Rogue play long Ultralisk versus, you know, Protoss Army games. That would have been just awesome to see. Yeah,
imagine a ZVZ with ultras. Like, imagine one guy. See, that's the thing we talked about earlier. You know how Terran has bio and has mech. Why can't we have a Zerg that goes Roach Hydra Lurker and a Zerg that goes Link Bane Muta Ultra? Why can't we have different playstyles like that? Why, you know, nobody really considers that, but why is that? And it's because the Ultra is so bad in ZVZ and ZVP, it's just non-existent. And, you know, like you said, the numbers can be tweaked, right? These are the initial numbers, and I'll test in game, see how it feels, see how it is. But the main issue that I want to do or to change is I want to see Ultra used in other two matchups without breaking the ZVT matchup. I don't want it to dominate where it's like, well, just Ultra every game. I want it to be like, oh, he's going Ultra, so I should change up my army comp. Maybe I should start walling off a little bit, right? So I want to make choke points to be able to face the Ultras. Because Ultras in Brood War were scary, right?
Yeah.
They actually had single target damage, but they were scary. They were super tanky. And there wasn't any unit where you were just like, well, that unit just destroys it and you just make it and that's it. And that exists in StarCraft 2. And I think that's wrong. I don't think there should be a hard counter in StarCraft 2. And I do think that if there's one unit I could pick in a whole game that gets super hard countered, it is the Ultra. So I think it's more about that and opening up playstyles and opening up that unit being used, not to be broken or to be a staple, just to be an option.
Interesting side effect of that change in the current TVZ meta, the 8 barracks kind of bio tank push. If Ultras get out with chitinous plating, it's one of the silliest things you've ever seen. If that Zerg isn't already down 20 workers, 3 Ultras join the fight, and you've got an almost purely Marine tank army with like 2 Marauders and maybe 1 Liberator rocks up, and these 3 Ultras are just like, whoa, and it's like watching a bunch of dudes on steroids just run through a children's playground and just punch these kids in the face. Like, the Marines like, we do nothing! Our whole army that was good to this point suddenly is worthless, right? So it would actually, as a byproduct, it would actually allow them as Marines, the core of the Terran army to that point.
Not counter them, but to be able to kill them.
Yeah, lowered armor, maybe more hit points to make up for it, but the Marines suddenly might actually do something. So I kind of like that's like a fun side effect of that as well. So we've talked about a couple Terran changes, a couple Zerg changes now as well. You said just one Protoss change. Obviously, we're kind of like getting our Beastyqt dream list. There was a lot more detail. And for people who've just tuned in, Wardy, thank you for the big raid, by the way, who people are watching live. Guys, we're going to get some links to all the Beasties videos, both down below in the podcast description, down in the YouTube description. I'm going to post them in chat now. While Beastie, what would be the short list of your most wanted Protoss changes? You can do 2 changes if you want. We don't need to limit it to just one.
First of all, well, I'm going to do 3. First one is very quick. Assimilator health needs to be same as Extractor and Refinery. I don't understand why it has 100 extra health. I never did. Fix that straight away. That's like, not even a balance thing.
This doesn't even count. This does not use up one of your wishes. This is such a basic thing.
It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
So the Zealot one would definitely be number 1. I would revert the Zealot to the old Zealots with charge, so they wouldn't be these fucking Zerglings. They would be Zealots. And basically, when you upgrade Zealot charge, it would have +2 damage on the charge effect. And then with each weapon upgrade, they would receive +2 damage on top of it. So once you're +3 weapons with Zealots, you would have 8 damage on your charge. So what this means is they would be usable in charge at all ends, but they would not have that extreme power spike where charge at all ends are a problem, and they would scale well into the late game. Again, it's not about buffing the all ends. It's about you can go 3 base Protoss, but you can also go charge at all in. And right now, charge at all ends are just not an option because Zealots, for that specific purpose, are complete trash. And I just don't think that was a good change. Now, again, guys, I know this is the most controversial one, and I am 100% on board of bringing the Mothership Core back. Before people say no, especially people that just tuned in, I would remove the shield battery. I think shield battery is a good building. It's a great defensive building. I just think it doesn't promote any fun gameplay. It's not interactive. It has no difference when it's used by gold player or grandmaster player. You just put it there and it just does its thing.
You've got to micro it to repair the pylon or the building sometimes, Beastie. That is the one the one small thing.
Listen, if you got to repair your buildings with it to not die, you probably lost the game already. So I would put in the Mothership Core. Now, one thing that I actually thought about this, what would I do with Protoss? And I said Protoss is probably the most complete race design-wise, fun-wise. Not balance-wise, fun-wise. And one of the things that people forgot is Mothership Core used to cost 100. And a lot of people are like, well, that's OP, right? Because it arrives super early. What people don't realize, it delayed your tech by 100 gas. So even though this is a buff defensively, it also nerfs the Protoss cheesing potential, which a lot of people hate, and it delays their tech a little bit. Now, you might be like, well, isn't that bad for Protoss? Well, it's not. And the reason for that is it gives you an option. Do you want to skip Mothership Core? Or do you want to not rush your tech out as fast? And this, again, gives an option between a good player that scouts and sees, okay, Zerg's droning up. With an Adept, I can shade back and I can, delay my Mothership Core. I can go faster Stargate. Or, oh no, I saw this. I need to chrono boost the Mothership Core out. Now, one problem, I mentioned this earlier, people hate a Mothership Core, Terran specifically, because of its pylon overcharge all-ins.
Yeah.
So I made it that you can only use it in the range of Nexus, the Nexus that starts, so that you can defend your third base, or the warp gate or gateway that turns into warp gate that's completed. So this would prevent people from pylon rushing your supply depots or doing some kind of like cannon pylon rushing super early. And it would mainly be used defensively. You could use it offensively, but it would be very delayed and give your opponent time to kind of prepare. Now, the Mothership Core would have 3 abilities. Pylon Overcharge. I nerfed the DPS, but I increased the duration. The reason I did this is because I felt that Pylon Overcharge back in the day, if you overcharge 4 pylons, that thing can kill like 50 medevacs. It doesn't matter. It will just melt through everything. But I felt that if you misused it, it punished you quite heavily, right? If you used it and the Terran just turns around, you're like, oh, I'm out of energy and I guess I'm going to die now. So what I did is I nerfed the damage on the Pylon Overcharge, but I made it slightly longer to compensate. So basically 25% damage nerf, but 25% duration increase. It also costs 50 energy, like the old one. The second ability is the shield overcharge, or whatever you want to call it. So it would basically work the same way as a shield battery, except you would put it in a pylon. And once again, you have the option. If you're getting all in and you have an immortal, do you want to use pylon overcharge to do more damage? Or you use shield overcharge to help keep that immortal alive until a war prism comes out, a sentry comes out, or whatever else. And once again, it gives you the option, and it will differentiate the bad players making bad decisions to the good players. And you could make a lot of, clutch plays of which one do you use. Do you want to save the unit, or do you want to kill more units?
Yeah.
The last ability would be the, let's just call it energy transfer. Now, I actually wanted to do 3 abilities because I thought having 2 is kind of like maybe too simple. The third ability would basically be transferring your energy to Protoss units, but it would be transferring 2 energy for 2 energy a second. So what does this mean? Let's say you use, for me, when I play Protoss, it's very frustrating when sometimes you use Hallucinated Phoenix and then the moment you click it, like roaches or lings arrive. And you're like, well, I guess I lose, right? I don't have the energy. So what I thought of is to give Mothership Core an ability to transfer the energy. So if you're getting Ling Bane all in, maybe you don't want to do the Pylon Overcharge, maybe you don't want to do Shield Battery, but instead you can slowly feed your sentry the energy to have enough for Force Field. This can also work with stuff like Phoenix lifting if you want to have more Phoenix energy to defend, or to feed your High Templars the energy. Now, this is a very minor ability, I would say, and you wouldn't really be able to abuse this, like feeding your High Templars, energy nonstop, because then you wouldn't have Pylon Overcharge or the Shield Battery. So it would be basically picking between the 3 things, and you wouldn't really be able to use Mothership Core offensively as you used to be able to. So,
except for like the scout, right, where you float it in to check the mineral line and then you bring it home or recall it straight away.
Another issue that was brought up is Blink Stalker all-ins. Now, that used to be a problem. And back in the day, if you remember, Mothership Core had some insane range, like vision range.
It could see further than an Overlord or an Overseer. It was crazy.
Yes, but this was, people also have to remember, this was before the blink got nerfed, right? Blink got increased research time.
Yeah, that's why it was so fast, right? I was trying to
Yes,
remember.
so
I'm like, why was that
also-
so strong?
Yeah, so this was in HOTS. Now, we also got Cyclones that can deny the Mothership Core. Back in HOTS, there wasn't anything that could kill the Mothership Core. It was just standing there, and you see it, and there's nothing you can do about it. The builds have changed quite a bit, right? You can't just do Blink Stalkers and kind of win the game, because Terran builds have changed, Protoss builds have changed, Reactor Hellions are an option, Hellion drops are an option, Widow Mines. There's a lot of different ways to go about it, and at the same time, if you see Twilight Council in the current game and you see Mothership Core, you know, your light bulb is going to pop and be like, there is a possibility for Blink all-ins. You go tanks, you play defensively, but I would also nerf the vision range of the Mothership Core to prevent that being an issue. It wouldn't be like 2 vision range, but it wouldn't be, I don't know however much it was back in the day, but I remember it was insane.
Yeah.
It was like more than, maybe same like Sieged Up Observer right now. I remember it was crazy.
For people in chat were just asking why I was laughing. I wasn't laughing at Beastie. I just was thinking of how you're like the Elon Musk of Protoss, and you've created a floating supercharger with that energy transfer. So I was just giggling to myself internally because I was like, "Oh my god, it's the Tesla supercharger!" Your Sentry's like, "Man, I'm out of juice." And the Mothership Core floats over, gives it just enough. You get the force field down before the banelings can get in. I was just thinking,
imagine
cool,
the
man.
Hype moments, right?
Yeah.
Rogue versus Zest, right? Rogue is going for Baneling Bust for the 10th time in a best of 7, right? And Zest is still unaware that he can open a Stargate or something, right?
Yeah.
And he force fields. The force field is expiring. The Mothership Core is transferring the energy to the Sentry, and he just gets the energy in time to force field again. And those kinds of moments are to be much cooler than, oh, here, I put this crap with energy, and now it's regenning shields in my unit, and then once it's done, it's useless, kind of thing.
Exactly.
So it's not about numbers. Is it going to be OP with the pylon overcharge? I don't know. It's about changing it up, making it more interesting, and I think giving players more options. From, do I go Mothership first or attack first, to which abilities do you use on Mothership Core? That's what's interesting to me, and that's what makes StarCraft 2 fun for me. Having different options, not this is the best thing and I'm going to go this every game because I can't win with anything else because of X or Y, which I think happened at Katowice quite a lot, like we mentioned earlier.
I think this is something which is, I just want to say I'm not fully on board with bringing the Mothership Core back, but I'm open to it. And if Blizzard did it, I'd say, cool, let's try this out. And I say this for anyone listening, I've just gone back through my Team Liquid blog to July 7th, 2015, and I literally have a blog post, which is a little bit of creative writing, comparing the Mothership Core to a floating testicle and just talking about it killing all my Zerg shit and being depressed, basically. That is the level of hatred I had for this unit. And even in early Legacy, when I started learning Protoss and playing, and I was pretty good at Protoss pretty quickly, and I think part of it was because I could shut down drops with that unit. I think there is definitely something where that was a new game where we're still figuring things out. And I think there is something where I'm like, just this idea of let's open up more options. It actually resonates with me, because what happened? We said, get rid of the Mothership Core. I was there. I was at the forefront of the mob. Blizzard, get rid of the Mothership Core. Get rid of it. And I was shaking my pitchfork and waving my torch. And maybe I wasn't quite as crazy as some people about it, but I was always like, this unit seems unfair. This unit seems unfair. This unit seems unfair. And then they replaced it with the shield battery. And let's cast our minds back. 2018, I believe this was when that first came in. Start of 2018, end of 2017. And IEM Pyeongchang, February 2018. No Mothership Core for SOS, right? But he did have shield batteries. Hatch Tech Overlord drop tech was still there. Scarlet cheeses him a ton of times with Zergling drop floods. beats him because he can't get on top of it. He can't cover all of his bases from the hatch tech drops. And then the Overlord drop gets removed as well soon after. And I guess...
See, that's what bothers me the most.
Yeah.
Those kinds of changes.
That's what I've loved so much about listening to these videos is I've cast my mind back and I'm like, was this thing in isolation bullshit? Yes. Was this thing in isolation bullshit? Yes. And individually, I've agreed with so many of these things getting the ban hammer. But now when you look back, it's like, yeah, like you said, was this really needed at a time? Yeah. Have we like cancel cultured StarCraft? Is that what,
yes.
Have we gone to the point where we've let our anger basically say nerf this, nerf this to the point where we've restricted too many of these overpowered strategies? I don't know. I'm sure some of these nerfs actually were probably good for the game. I'm sure some of them were. But I think we've gone too far with too many things that limit interaction. And I think we need to go back in the other direction and we need to take some risks. And after listening to you talk about this, like I said, I was talking about, even Tunneling Claw Roaches got nerfed. Did I think that's OP? Yeah, probably. Do I think that's a good change? Yeah, probably. But it's part of a bigger pattern of nerfing too many things and nerfing the Reaper and nerfing Beyond and taking away the Raven's offensive abilities and giving it just interference matrix, which is really impossible to use or very hard to use in gigantic fights. And we've added that Queen range and we've nerfed the Warp Prism pickup range and, we've made it so auto turrets can't go down. So I guess for me, I've started to look at this and I say, right now, I think StarCraft needs some changes. And I've gotten so much on board with this idea of let's take some risks. Let's bring back some old shit. Let's make the Mothership Core more interesting. And if we bring back this thing that's a problem unit, I'm like, it's still a tier 1 hero floating unit that can defend a lot of all-ins and be very powerful. Is that still there? Yes. But we can soften the point of, oh, bam, you snapped the Doom drop with the 4 overcharges in the main. But like you said, reduce the damage just a little bit, increase the duration. But if that Terran turns around and that Mothership Core is out of energy, it's a useless unit, right? They can hit a different base. They can come back in.
That's the thing. But it gives the player the power. Do I want to overcharge 4 and hope that Terran doesn't pay attention? Or do I want to overcharge 1 and maybe Terran goes through, right?
Exactly.
Another thing you have to remember is with the change, you can't use pylon overcharge at the edge of your bases unless you have gateways. So you can't just put pylons everywhere and just be like, oh, overcharge that one, overcharge this one. At the end of the day, I think that a lot of things were handled poorly. I do agree that Mothership had a lot of its issues. But if the problem was snapping the all-ins with 4 pylons, why not reduce the energy to 150? See what happens, right? You don't necessarily, again, you don't need to nerf the damage. You don't need to nerf this or that. There's a lot of different ways to go about nerfing a unit. A lot of people, mentioned like, I don't know, Zerg Economy or Zerg Queens or Banshees. I've seen this so many times, buff Banshees. You don't need to. Just look what the problem is, why Banshees aren't used, and maybe work on that. And then think about, okay, if I do this change, what will the outcome be against the other units that unit interacts with often? And I think that's a way better way to balance than just be like, well, give it fucking 10 damage and see what happens. Because doing stuff like that has a chance to ruin something completely, and it just doesn't fix anything, right? The recent change for the Ultras that we've had, increasing the speed, why? Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
The Ultras were already used against Terran, so you just buffed it against Terran. But why? It was used in that matchup. Why not look at the other direction and be like, how can we make it good in PvZ? How can we make it good in ZvZ? And, it's a lot of those changes, and I don't agree with those. At the end of the day, people, just like with, current game, the mod that Photolos helped me create, you won't agree with every single thing. And the point isn't for me to be like, that's the change, that's staying, and that's it. It's just to be like, that's interesting. We could do something with that. And this is the starting point. And I like that idea, but maybe, damage needs to be tuned. Maybe this needs to be tuned. But it's about having the game being played out differently and not so much focusing on the current numbers that we have in the mod that people can try out and play.
And we're not screeching for Blizzard's attention. I will be linking this entire video to the team. They're in contact with me and other people in the community and pro gamers, and they are reaching out to them and talking to them. I'm going to be linking it to them. So I'm sure they're going to be listening. I'm going to be linking all of Beastie's videos with more detail in them. And especially this last half hour or however long where we're really going, hey, this is our tight wish list. Now, I've already had you for a long time. Before we finish up, I do want to talk about one more change you suggested, which I've been over time thinking more and more about, and that is creep spread and the vision. Now, I've thought about different nerfs for it. I think that let's get rid of vision. This is something Rotterdam's been talking about for like 4 or 5 years now, where he has said, and your change is a little different, so we'll get to that, but he said basically just remove vision from creep tumors. It's already a huge movement boost. Just make it so only the active tumor that needs to spread has vision. It remains the same. All the other tumors have no vision. You need to put out overlords, zerglings. You need to fight for map control, and you need to actually get out there. And this is a huge change. But for me, what frustrates me playing against Zerg and also watching versus games at pro level is the absolute boner killer that is the inability for players to come back against a Zerg who has good creep spread. I've recently watched Bly actually evolve into, I keep talking about how his macro TVZ is actually the best it's ever been, because no matter what crazy shit Bly does in the early game, his creep spread is so good right now, and he will use his crazy aggression even if it's counted to cover the map in creep, and he'll make so many cool plays off it. And it's great, and it's beautiful. It's amazing what he does with it. But I think what I look at is the fact that Zerg players are getting so much vision across the map, and their opponents, what do you do when you're behind in StarCraft? You backstab, you counterattack, you wait for their army to move across the map, and then you come in with a base trade or a counterattack force. These are things no one's able to pull off when they're behind against Zerg at the moment, because creep sees everything. And it's, especially as we get bigger maps, which I love bigger maps, it's amplifying in its strength. We see something in ZVT. If the creep tumors get past a certain point, the Terran player's heart sinks. They panic, they're sweating. What the fudge? Because once it gets out past a certain amount, how do you clear it? Now, obviously the Raven ties in with that. If we made the Raven a better unit, that could help.
Yeah.
But even without that, it's like it just spreads like mad. It's all over the place, and it's just such a powerful boost to the Zerg. And there's too many moments where the Zerg can go, cool, that's just a dropship over there clearing creep. Let's go A-move some shit. I don't even need to look at it. But if you remove some of this information and some of these areas where you're like, oh, creep's getting cleared there, but I don't even know what's doing it, the Zerg can't just A-move some shit. They don't know if they're running into an army. The Zerg needs to start actively fighting for map control a bit more. And I think this is something that Zerg players aren't being forced to do as much. And because of it, we're seeing Zergs knowing exactly when and where to fight, where to put their actions and their APM, and it's creating tilted results. So you've suggested just limiting the vision on those creep tumors to about half. I mean, what's your take on this whole creep situation? Because I think it's a big problem.
So I do agree with it. I don't think this is an issue at a lower level, so I don't think this would make an impact at a lower level. But at a higher level, like you said, it's incredibly difficult. And I often actually see this in tournaments. Why doesn't he just drop? You can't. Like, they know you're coming before the drop even lands. And it's because of that much vision. Now, the option to have only active creep tumor out on the map, I feel like is a little bit awkward, right? Think about playing the game, and then you just have a line of vision and then nothing behind it. It kind of feels, weird, right?
Yeah.
It just
that's a worm, and the rest is just its poo that it's spreading behind it. You can only see the active worm at the front. On a lore sense, it makes sense, but I get you. It would be very weird having this section of vision. It's just weird.
It's not about, So my suggestion was to nerf creep tumor vision, the inactive ones, by 50%. Now, initially I wanted to do 30%. So it has like a radius of 2, let's say, so that you see around the creep tumor. But if Marines would shoot at it, you wouldn't necessarily have that much vision to see the Marines. So what this would mean is, this is, first of all, the Raven change that you brought up. If you would buff the Raven, it would be more used, thus creep would be more denied. Now there's no point to open a Raven. It's just shit. So that's one thing. Second thing is, if you nerf the inactive creep tumor vision, you would suddenly have Zergs, instead of just rushing forward with creep, every, let's say, third creep tumor would be left behind, the active one. Why? Because it would give full vision. So suddenly, you're nerfing the creep indirectly. You're nerfing the creep spread indirectly and forcing the Zergs to, once again, you can go straight forward and spread the creep as far as you can, but you have a choice to make. Do you want the full vision forward as much as you can to have that creep spread, or do you want to have full vision at the area where your creep spread is already at? So we started with the 50% vision change. You can still, if you spread out your creep tumors, the inactive ones, far enough, you can still get the full vision. So maybe nerfing it more would be better, so that it forces the Zergs to have that active creep tumor behind, and have that option of, well, you can go for more creep spread but less vision. So there's a downside. Or you could go for more vision but less creep spread. Suddenly there's a choice to be made depending on your unit composition, on your playstyle, of position where you're in the game. Suddenly, if you're Zerg's opponent, you can be like, okay, because over time you're going to get a feel of how far the creep spread should be. And you can get a feel of, okay, the creep spread is halfway through the map. That means that he has no active creep tumors behind it. So maybe I can sneak him some Hellions. Maybe even go as far as for the opponents to be able to see where the inactive creep tumors are, but you still need vision to kill them. So what this would do is you can see, like, okay, there's 3 inactive creep tumors next to each other, so you can go around them, completely avoiding them. Because that gives you more options as an opponent and as a Zerg player. And like you said, I think that static vision as creep is too strong at a high level. And it's very, very hard to get any damage done. And I think this is most visible in ZVT specifically against Bio. But in general, against drops, against run-bys, whether it's Zealot or Marine run-bys, it becomes a lot easier for the Zerg players to deal with it. And on top of that, I don't think that change would actually make the Zerg, unplayable or bad for Zerg, because you literally have a 25 mineral unit that you can actually put at certain places and gain vision that way. Well, so it wouldn't be like the end of Zerg. You still have what to gain vision with, which is the Overlords and the Zerglings, but suddenly you're committing something, some supply to it, or the Overlords, or you have to do extra actions to get that extra vision, like the Protoss and Terran have as well.
Well, I think of that in Brood War, where you've got the Zergling spot as always, and you've got your little Zergling squad that sees the move out and pulls back and kind of flanks around and immediately tries to cut off reinforcements. Right? We'll be ready to flank on that army, right? You've got this like much more actively managed map control. Am I saying Zerg should always have to do this in StarCraft 2? Not necessarily, but it's more exciting. And I want to say, because you said 50% and you pointed out why that's maybe not enough, I want to go extreme, guys. Beastie's being way too safe on this. I think literally 0 vision or 10%, like as much as a burrowed Zergling, like almost no vision on those inactive tumors. And then you're still going to have
that would be about 20-30%.
About 20%? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you can have the Zerg players, if they're the best player, guess what? They're going to have to actively either leave tumors behind or go, oh, I left a gap there because I accidentally did. You know what most pro Zergs do? They've lowered their repeat rate on their keyboards. They can just hold down a button and just go, and it just spreads 20 tumors in half a second, right?
Yeah. That nerfs the rapid fire as well. It
nerfs the rapid fire, and then they got to come, oh, I left a few gaps. Shit, I got to manually send my queen to put these tumors around. It's something they've got to actively manage. They've got to put more effort into it. It can't be this kind of just spam with the rapid fire across the map, which is a big problem at the moment. So I honestly think this is one of these changes. Does it affect them a lot? Yeah, it would if we nerfed vision completely. Let's say creep, somehow you could spread it without vision and it just automatically spread or some shit, or you had to manually do it, but you could do it through fog and there was no vision. I'm like the person who actually wants to hop onto a map where I can test that and play that and see how I as a Zerg would have to work around it. Because for me, it's very interesting and exciting, even though I know it would probably be a bit unfair. But if we can even just do it that way, where it's like, just limit that vision, make it a bit more of a decision. I mean, even that to me is something which I think we've got to bring some nerf into that creep spread sooner rather than later, because we are tending towards more bases in Legacy, bigger maps. People are better at big macro games. And I think we've got to take this away as a feature, which at the moment, what does it do? It limits interaction. It forces the player to say, I'm either going to clear this creep and just wait till it's all clear before I actually fight, or I'm going to go around, I got spotted by an overlord. Okay, I'm going to go back and just wait for one big timing attack, one big push, because I can't surprise you. I can't harass you without the mutas intercepting the drop, right? At the moment, the creep is limiting interaction, and anything that's limiting interaction, for me, it's a killer.
It's just bad. Yeah. I mean, go look at Heart of the Swarm. Go look at pro games. There's drops all the time. All the time happening, everywhere on the map. And that's completely gone. And like you said, why would you drop when he's going to know about it if he has Hydras on specific maps where you can reach those medevacs even when they're trying to hide? That's a lot of units to lose at a pro level. So people would rather just do a massive push. Thus, we have the 3 bases, trained pushes, because why would you drop? It's too risky for something that's probably going to get spotted straight away, and people kind of stray away from that quite a bit. There was also one of the suggestions when I made it to the creep, and I feel like it overlaps with Sensor Tower, but people had suggestion to completely remove the vision from inactive creep tumors.
I was just about to bring this up.
Like Sensor Tower alike, so that in a way, like creep feels that there's units on top of it, but doesn't see what the units are.
It's a spider web, right?
You on the map. Yes, something like that. So,
something's entered the lair. You don't know what it is, but you can sense something through like the through the ground.
So you can feel like the pulses. It doesn't have to be like Sensor Tower, right? It can be units entering the creep, and then you see a pulse like on the map.
Yeah.
Like units moving. And it doesn't tell you how many units. It doesn't tell you what it is, right? But there's something coming. Another thing that they could do is make it so that flying units don't trigger that at all. So that if you do a drop and you fly over creep, why would it detect it? It's not on the creep, right?
Exactly.
So then suddenly drops are more viable. Suddenly drops are a way to avoid being on the creep and giving the idea to the Zerg that the units are coming. And I think that specific idea is very, very cool. Initially, I thought it maybe overlaps with Sensor Tower, but what you mentioned, and again, this is why we're talking about this, I wouldn't think of this myself, right? I thought of this when someone mentioned it to me, and I was like, it's same like Sensor Tower, right? I'm not sure if I like that. But what you brought up is it can ping, right? It like a signal, right? So then it's much more interesting. It doesn't tell you how many units. It just tells you there's activity on the creep. And for all you lore boys out there, it makes sense, right? You're standing on the creep. I don't know what creep is made of. I don't know if it's shit, but it's like connected to the whatever.
It's purple Play-Doh, but it's got Zerg veins running through the purple Play-Doh. That's it.
Yeah, and it's like a spider web. It feels there's something there. You don't know what amount. Maybe the ping is bigger if there's X amount of units on it, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's there's like 3 levels of ping, like small one if it's like a couple of units, medium one, and then huge one when there's like whole army moving towards it. But you don't know what it is. And I know that the knee-jerk reaction is, well, I don't have vision now. Well, guess what, bitch? Terran and Protoss don't either. You got to put units out there. That's how that works. Put your Zerglings out there, and you get vision. But you also get speed on the creep. So it works both ways.
Hells yeah.
And it promotes active gameplay.
And you know what? In terms of easily putting it in the game, as much as I love the idea of there just being a little bit of like a little vibration animation or something, if it was just the same Sensor Tower graphic, exclamation marks, that's it, I'd still be happy with that. I still think that's cool. I love the idea of, having the vibrations, but you can't see the air units. I think this stuff's super cool. But even just getting the Sensor Tower version of Creep, to me, is just so much better, I
mean, it makes more sense, right?
Yeah. Is it a double drop of Marines, or is that 10 tanks, coming over? You don't know. You've got no idea.
You can also have it like instead of like a signal, you can have it like a circle, right? Of an army. Imagine playing, a finals of the tournament, and the Terran pulls 20 SCVs and sends them on the bottom side, and the Zerg notices, and they move the army down, and then the medevacs fly into the main base, right?
And he wanted to lose the SCVs as well, right? Because he's just built 5 extra orbitals. He wants to drop his SCV count, and he pulls the army out of position.
That's tactics right there. Ooh. You know, that's StarCraft. To me, StarCraft has become too much of clicking and not enough thinking. And listen, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying StarCraft is all about clicking, but we have strayed away from tactics, from strategies, from big brain plays to, well, this guy just macros really well. And is that really the highest compliment we want to give a player in a RTS game?
Yeah.
I personally don't think we should. Macro is super important. Micro is super important. They're both impressive. They're both very important. But I don't think that should be the peak of StarCraft. It should be the way you think, the way you move your units, the way you use your units, and not just how well you can spread your Marines or inject hatcheries.
This has been such an enlightening conversation. Obviously, normally the show, I'm like, hour of 20, hour and a half max. We've gone a lot longer because I've been really enjoying this. So I hope you don't mind having stayed up late. It's something where I really, like I said, I'm going to be sending this over to Blizzard, and I'm especially going to be writing up a little short list of your wish list there. I'm going to emphasize the creep as my most important thing, which I think we need to try something like this. I'm also going to run this by a bunch of pro gamers, and I'm going to have all the Zergs shout at me, Risky, you got me on Discord, hit me up, Risky. I know you've got some messages to say about how unfair it would be to nerf creep in any way at all. I love you, bro. Hit me up, Josh. But I want to hear from more people and get a discussion going. But I think the other thing outside of these specific changes, this is just me and Beasty, you know, our small brain ideas. In terms of the shared intelligence of the StarCraft community, we represent a very small section of that. This is obviously Beasty's ideas, with me adding just a little bit of my own input as well. But it doesn't necessarily have to be this. I think what we want to hit on more than anything is the philosophy behind it that Beasty has been doing such a good job of elucidating in these videos. It's something I have never sat down and thought about it. And that's why I'm listening to these videos. You all need to go watch them, because you're like, oh shit, this mother trucker actually sat down and thought about some shit for a long time. And we've thought about the philosophy of, we want more options. We want less things that restrict interaction. We want to stop nerfing things into the ground quite as hard. We want to stop trying to take strategies out of the game. There always has to be some balance tweaking and number tweaking, but I think we need to take a few more risks with what's in the game. And don't get me wrong, we're not saying go back to Heart of the Swarm or go back to Wings of Liberty, but we're just simply saying maybe bring back some of the things from early Legacy. Maybe bring back some of the things from Heart of the Swarm. There is so many types of StarCraft 2 that have been played over the past 10 years that are drastically different, right? There has been so many different balance patches, so many different Ravens, so many different Zealots, so many different Banelings even. The Baneling even has changed as a unit. The Ultralisks have changed drastically as a unit. Broodlords have changed. Lurkers and new units have come in. And I think we want to try to just promote interaction. We want to increase that strategic diversity. And we also, you know, for me specifically, as the how can we stop Zerg dominating as much? I just want creep to stop being so bullshit. That's my own personal wish list. And that's someone who I know I will get my ass kicked as for the first month when that happens to creep. If it happens, I know that's going to be a big adjustment period for me.
It's a big change.
It's big. Yeah. I mean, think about when the Mothership Core was taken away, though. Every Protoss player couldn't hold shit for 2 months. We didn't know what the frack to do. We're like, how do I defend anything without my bloody Mothership Core? Batteries aren't good enough. But we did figure it out. So I want us to all dig deep. I want Blizzard to stay strong and ignore those screeches from the BattleNet forums and just hold their ground a little bit. Stay diplomatic, but be a bit riskier, please. So I'm hoping we can get some changes in. I want to see a bit more strategic diversity, and I want to see Zerg being a little bit less dominant in their information. Final point on that, something which I think the map-making community has already heard and started doing, and we're finally seeing it filter into this map pool. Get rid of the pervert pillar. The little high ground above the natural expansion where an overlord gets to hover in the early game and see everything that's going on. It just does not need to be there. And you can also, if you are going to have one near there, Beastie suggested this in his video. We've seen it in one of the new maps. Sorry, I can't remember which one off the top of my head. but the pillar's further away towards the third. So it doesn't actually see units leaving the base. It has to come off the high ground to properly see the full natural. It can't get to the main base easily from there without getting shot down by Marines or Stalkers either to see what's on top of the ramp. So basically, you've got a pervert pillar that gives some vision, but it's heavily nerfed. Also, for map makers, the gases should be on the opposite side of the natural so that Overlord doesn't see that. If we want to nerf the Overlords a little bit more as well, I think we're seeing that a little bit more often. But removing the Overlord free vision as well as nerfing creep, I think, is the first big steps to really removing Zerg dominance in the current meta.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. I actually think that Zerg units on their own, non-spellcasters specifically, they're not actually good units. I don't think Zerg is winning because they're, Hydra's OP. It comes from, like you said, creep spread. It comes from queens. It comes from different things that you just get overwhelmed at one point. And like I said, I think that one thing we all agree on is Zerg at the highest level needs something to be changed, aka nerfed. But I don't think that there is only one way to go about it, and I don't think that nerfing the units is the way to go about it. Nerfing units only removes those units from gameplay. It doesn't actually do anything else.
I actually
nerf playstyles, not the race.
You could maybe even buff the units or buff the lava production, right? The thing is, I actually feel like Zerg maybe could have some buffs to their fundamental strengths if you remove some of this information. Because I think at the moment, you've often got Zergs on lower work account or lower supply than Protoss players winning the game. And you're like, oh, is this what Zerg is now? Like, this is different. So, it's because they're seeing everything that's coming and they're morphing the 10 Ravagers just before the Protoss attack hits, right? It's they're morphing the 30 Banelings to reinforce their defense. It's they're having the army set up or they're countering it in the right way. So don't get me wrong. If you remove some of that information, we might see Zergs getting dumpstered.
Yeah, of course.
For a while.
That's why you do the adjustments. Right.
We might have to give them something in return. We're not just saying slam them into the ground, but it is definitely something where the current advantages of Zerg being this all-seeing race is something I think me and Beastie both would like to tone down in some way. And does that need to be answered with something else? Absolutely. This isn't final. I think even just the creep change alone, for me, if we just put that into the game now and started testing it while we've got a big gap before a big tournament on the ladder competitively, I would be so happy with that. But we've got to make changes. We've got to be more risky, and we've got to try and put more interaction back into the game. There's so many cool suggestions in here from Beastie. I think most of them are well thought out. I'm sure a lot of people have reasons why some of them could be problematic. Share them, discuss it, take a gigantic deep breath before telling me and Beastie to go hurt ourselves, or before telling anyone else in the comments section to go hurt themselves. We all want to have StarCraft just be more fun for all of us. Me and Beastie both play all three races. Yes, Beastie's a bit more Terran and Protoss favored in that. Yeah. Still has some sick Zerg all-ins, by the way. Some sick, dirty all-ins. I love casting you random because of that. But, we've both got a pretty spread viewpoint in terms of where we come from. We're not... I know everybody, there's always like a few vocal people like, you want to hurt my race, you want to take away my thing, fuck you. We really don't. We'd actually like to give you more exciting things in return. I saw someone in chat say, so you guys want Zerg to just be a purely passive race that's got to fight for map control? Well, the thing is, at the moment, Zerg is very much a race that I think sits in the corner of the map and is trying to just like defend and counter at many points in the game, and is... I want to actually remove that I see everything and then I just counter it and react and I counter it and react. I'd like Zerg to be a bit more proactive and out on the map and be making the plays aggressively again. That's personally, I think removing the information would encourage Zerg to be more active on the map and be more proactive. We can debate about it as much as we want, though. I want to stop stealing Beastie's time. Any final thoughts on all of this to leave? The balance team, I'm sure, will be watching this, Beastie. Any words for them or the people in the community?
I think that, once again, sorry about the dogs barking. Once again, I do think StarCraft needs bigger changes. Stop with the balance changes. We need design changes. The mod that I was talking about that we discussed the whole night is already made by Photolos. Shout out to him for making it. Not all changes are final, but people can try it out. They can play it. And I'm still making some adjustments, and soon I will be playing versus Grandmaster players. And Pig, if you ever want to, we can play a couple of games,
Hells yeah.
test a couple of things, see how it feels. But people can, again, test it. Does that mean that, some people, the StarCraft community likes to go hardcore with, throw away the Blizzard, put in BC for president? I don't think it's quite like that. This is, for me, a fun mod and something that I can, work around, think about, explore the possibilities. I've said in my videos, if Blizzard makes one of the changes that I suggested and it makes StarCraft better, then I think I've done at least something. I've contributed something. I'm not asking for everything to be implemented. I just gave out kind of like different options to different solutions. And as far as my mod goes, people have asked, am I going to organize tournaments? I might organize show matches in the future with players. I don't know. I don't want to give a specific answer, but if it is fun and if people enjoy it, I'll definitely be doing something like that.
All right. Well, for those of you, just to reiterate one more time, the way you create extension mods, you go to custom games, click on one of your melee maps that you want, just click a ladder map. Rather than going create lobby, there's a button next to it, create with mod. And there's a search box. If you just type Beastyqt, one word, it will pop up as the first thing. It's on NA, it's on EU. I'm not sure if it's on the Asian server. It might be. But yeah, you can host it up there and try it out with your friends. Obviously, Beasty's already said, I would have actually changed this thing and this thing from it. This is all. If you just want to hop down and have a feel with some of these things, try it out. Thank you, everybody, for
final.
Exactly. The numbers have got to be tweaked. Part of me, there's like a chaos person in me who wishes. There's like the Bounds team is just, for some reason, they're smoking meth watching this right now. And they're like, no, let's just pull the trigger. And they take every change from all of your videos and they just put them like live on the ladder now. And we're like, what the fuck just happened to this game? Like, it's utter chaos. It would be insane, but it would be so much fun as well. Hopefully the Bounds team is out there, enjoying some fun recreational habits and gets their, their inhibitions kind of waved a little bit. Either way, thanks for joining me, mate. Guys, of course, you can check out Beastyqt on Twitch, on YouTube, Beastyqt, BeastyqtSC2 as well on Twitter. Links are going to be down below in the description. We're going to spam his link in Twitch chat again for those crazy people who don't already follow him. But click on the description. You guys can follow him there. Lots of links. Thank you so much for joining me, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. And yeah, it was a really good talk. I enjoyed it quite a bit. So thank you.
Much love, brother.
All right. Have a good one.
You too, mate.
Goodbye, everyone.
Girls with the